Calista Vennor caught the smallest thief with one end of a smoked venison haunch in his mouth. His two brothers were pulling from the other side, although the meat remained firmly trapped in her window. The pale gray-white pup was supposed to be leading the escape, but he had become wedged between a rain barrel and 6 feet of evidence. For several seconds, no one moved. Morning sunlight entered Callista's smokehouse through the open shutters. It touched rows of hanging herbs, copper scales, and the enormous haunch balanced across the sill. Juniper smoke drifted beneath the rafters. Outside, dew shone on the yard grass. The 3 wolf pups stared at her. Calista stared back. The smallest pup was black from nose to tail. His round paws slid against the floorboards as he tried to reverse through the window. The middle pup had rich red-brown fur and one ear turned inside out. He pulled with great confidence in the wrong direction. Their leader was larger and leaner. Pale gray-white fur covered his narrow body, with darker shading along his ears and spine. He stood outside the window, gripping the thick end of the haunch while watching Calista with grave blue-gray eyes. He looked intelligent. He also had a length of butcher's twine caught around his head. Calista folded her arms over her work apron. "Your organization is impressive." The pale pup's ears lifted. "Your exit strategy needs work." His ears lowered again. The russet pup released the meat. The sudden loss of resistance sent the black pup backward into a sack of wood chips. Only his hind legs remained visible. The pale leader closed his eyes. Calista understood the feeling. She stepped closer without reaching for them. The smokehouse floor creaked beneath her boots. All 3 pups went still. That was when humor gave way to concern. They were too thin. Their coats were clean enough to suggest recent care, but their ribs showed beneath the fur. The black pup's legs trembled when he climbed from the wood chips. The red-brown one licked grease from the window ledge with frantic concentration. The pale pup did not lick anything. He moved between Calista and his brothers. His posture contained no childish confusion. It was protective, practiced, and far too serious for a young wolf. Calista lowered herself onto one knee. Smoke and warm meat surrounded them. Beyond the yard fence, market carts rattled toward the village square. "No one is taking it away yet," she promised. The pale pup watched her hands. Calista drew a small trimming knife from her belt. The 3 wolves recoiled, so she placed it on the floor and pushed it away. Then she untied her apron cord and used the blunt wooden toggle to loosen the twine around the leader's head. He could have bitten her. Instead, he stood perfectly still while she freed one ear. There. A criminal should be able to hear the charges. The middle thief sneezed. Calista rose and crossed to the cutting table. She selected 3 slices from a separate smoked shoulder. This batch contained little salt and no onion, garlic, or strong seasoning. She made it for night patrol shifters who ate in wolf form. She placed the slices on 3 wooden boards. The black pup moved first. The pale leader blocked him with one foreleg. Calista cut a piece from each slice and ate it. She chewed, swallowed, then returned the boards to the floor. Only then did the pale pup step aside. The 2 younger wolves fell upon the meat. The leader remained alert until both had begun eating. After that, he approached the smallest portion. Calista quietly switched his board with the largest one. He noticed. His blue-gray eyes rose to her face. "Management fee," she explained. "You carried the twine." The pup lowered his muzzle and ate. Calista examined the stolen haunch while they finished. It weighed nearly 20 pounds and had hung 6 feet above the floor. 3 young wolves had moved a crate, climbed onto the cutting bench, pushed the haunch from its hook, and aimed it through the only unlatched window. The plan had required cooperation. It had not required geometry. The pale pup finished his slice last. He nosed the empty boards toward his brothers, checking for scraps before licking his own. Callista's chest tightened. "Where did you come from?" 3 ears turned toward the eastern road. A horn sounded beyond the village. The pups changed instantly. The black one crawled beneath the cutting table. His rusty brown brother tried to follow and struck his head on the lower shelf. The pale leader jumped onto the sill, then returned when his brothers failed to escape. He stood in front of them. The horn sounded again. Hooves thundered over the stone bridge. Market voices rose outside. Someone shouted for the north lane to clear. Calista moved to the smokehouse door. 12 mounted guards entered the yard beneath dark green banners. Large patrol wolves ran beside the horses. Their leather tack bore the crowned pine emblem of Aldergrave. At the center rode Alpha King Cormac Aldergrave. Calista knew him from coins, tax notices, and one public procession viewed from behind taller people. None had shown how large he was. He dismounted before his black horse stopped moving. Cormac stood well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders beneath a dark riding coat. Wind pushed deep brown hair across his forehead. His face was strong, severe, and pale from a night without sleep. Amber-green eyes searched the yard with an intensity that made every guard hold still. Then he saw the 3 pups. The king's expression broke. Bryn. The pale leader stiffened. Cormac looked at the red-brown wolf. Ludo. The pup stopped, attempting to become part of the shelf. The king's gaze found the smallest black pup beneath the table. His voice roughened. Nilo. Royal heirs. Calista looked at the empty boards, the trapped venison, and the twine still lying near Bryn's paws. She had just given strategic criticism to 3 princes. The king stepped toward them. Bryn moved in front of his brothers. Cormac stopped. Pain passed through his face so quickly that the guards might have missed it. Calista did not. The king had found his missing sons, yet none ran to him. A square-built beta dismounted nearby. He wore a plain brown coat and carried 2 ledgers under one arm. "Your Majesty," he murmured, "let Captain Osric secure the room." Captain Osric Bell approached with 4 guards. Bryn bared his teeth. The sound was small, but his brothers pressed closer behind him. Calista raised one hand. "Please keep the patrol wolves outside." Captain Osric stared at her. The Alpha King did too. Callista's Omega instincts registered the concentrated authority in the room and strongly recommended silence. Her professional instincts had spent 14 years ignoring people who stood too close to sharp tools. "The pups are cornered," she explained. "Adding 6 adult wolves will not improve their morning." Cormac looked at Bryn's rigid body. He ordered the patrol wolves back. Captain Osric obeyed. The beta's eyebrows rose slightly. Cormac returned his attention to Calista. "Who are you?" "Calista Vennor. This is my smokehouse." His gaze moved to the venison lodged in her window. "Were they stealing from you?" "They were attempting to." The second pup licked the ledge again. Calista amended her answer. "They achieved part of the objective." Something nearly moved at the corner of Cormac's mouth. Fear stopped it before it became a smile. He crouched several feet from his sons. "Bryn, come here." The pale pup did not move. Cormac removed his riding gloves and placed both hands on the floor. His voice softened. "You are not in trouble." Nilo crept from beneath the table. The king's face brightened. The black pup walked directly to Calista and sat on her boot. The beta looked at the ceiling. Calista felt sympathy for everyone involved, including the boot. Cormac drew a slow breath. "They have been missing since midnight. They arrived before sunrise." "Did they eat?" "Yes," Calista confirmed. Relief entered his scent, pine and rain warming around the sharper edge of fear. "They refused supper," he explained. "The nursery staff reported another appetite episode." Calista studied the pup's ribs. "Another?" The beta explained that their appetites had declined for 3 weeks. Pike submitted stable weight records and blamed shifting lessons. Yesterday, the boys resisted a hands-on examination in either form, so the physician only checked for fever. Bryn glanced toward the trapped haunch. Calista followed his gaze. "They do not appear to have lost interest in food." The silence that followed was brief and uncomfortable. Captain Osric ordered a guard to bring the princess's travel provisions. A sealed chest arrived from one of the pack horses. The beta opened it and removed 3 covered bowls. The moment the lids lifted, Every pup backed away. The bowls held minced meat pressed into neat red squares. Gravy shone over the surface. Decorative parsley rested in one corner. Calista smelled boiled grain, old fat, and enough perfume herb to disguise both. Cormac pushed one bowl forward. This came from the royal kitchen. Bryn stepped over Nilo and growled. Calista crouched beside the bowl. She did not touch it at first. She examined the color, the broken texture along one edge, and the pale particles beneath the gravy. May I? Cormac nodded. She pinched off a small piece and rubbed it between her fingers. The mixture crumbled too easily. Proper minced venison held together through natural protein and fat. This contained cooked barley, rendered tallow, and perhaps 1/3 meat. The meat itself smelled tired, not spoiled, not fit for growing wolves either. What does the ration record claim? Calista asked. The beta opened his ledger. Prime hindquarter venison, liver twice weekly, marrow broth, and ground oats at 10%. Calista held up the crumbling piece. This contains more grain than meat. The fat came from cattle, probably stored too warm. The venison is shoulder trimming. Captain Osric frowned. You know that by touching it? By working with meat every day since I was 12. She split the piece. A gray thread of connective tissue crossed the center. Hindquarter meat does not carry this pattern, shoulder does. The beta leaned closer. Cormac's attention stayed on his sons. Would it make them ill? Calista explained that the ration would not cause immediate illness. It would leave growing shifters hungry because they needed more usable protein and fat than adults. The russet child placed one paw over his stomach. Callista's anger arrived quietly. She had supplied patrol stations for years. She knew what happened when officials purchased excellent food on paper and delivered cheap weight in bowls. Hungry wolves became tired, irritable, and easy to accuse of poor discipline. Cormac rose. Cormac's face became still. Osric, seal the nursery pantry and royal meat stores. No one removes a crate, ledger, or scrap. The captain signaled 2 guards. The beta closed his ledger. I will compare supplier invoices. Cormac looked at him. You will also find how 3 children passed the palace walls. Yes, Your Majesty. Calista watched the command restore his public shape. He sounded like the ruler on the coins again. Only his hands betrayed him. One remained tightly closed at his side. Bryn noticed, too. The pale pup approached one cautious step. Cormac lowered himself again. Bryn stopped just outside his reach. It was progress measured in inches. Then Nilo attempted to drag the stolen haunch from the window. The meat shifted suddenly and knocked a copper pan from the sill. It struck the floor with a tremendous clang. Nilo jumped straight into Callista's skirt. Ludo ran beneath Cormac's coat. Bryn tried to protect both brothers and became tangled in the king's cloak. For several chaotic seconds, the feared Alpha King of Aldergrave stood in a smokehouse wearing 2 princes and half a string of butcher's twine. Calista retrieved the pan. They appear ready to travel. The beta covered his mouth with one hand. Cormac freed Bryn carefully. They are returning to the palace. The 3 pups gathered behind Calista. The king shut his eyes. Calista felt the weight of the moment. She also felt Nilo sitting on her left foot again. Perhaps I should come long enough to inspect their next meal. Cormac opened his eyes. His gaze held hers across the ridiculous wall of small wolves. You would do that? For a consultation fee. The beta made a strangled sound. Calista added, and compensation for 1 damaged haunch. Cormac looked at the meat in her window. They did not remove it. Attempted theft still affects presentation. His eyes warmed despite everything. Submit the invoice. Calista packed her inspection knives, sample papers, scales, and spice vials into a leather case. She closed the smokehouse with help from her apprentice, then returned to the yard. The royal carriage waited with its door open. Nilo climbed inside first. Ludo followed with a strip of venison Calista did not remember giving him. Bryn remained beside her. The pale pup studied Cormac, the guards, and the road. Then he picked up the end of Callista's apron in his teeth. His decision was clear. She entered the carriage. All three princes followed. Cormac stood outside for one heartbeat too long. Calista saw hurt cross his face again. Then Bryn shifted toward the open door and left a narrow space beside himself. The king noticed. He climbed in. The carriage began moving toward Aldergrave Keep with three rescued princes, one Omega meat specialist, and a stolen venison strip hidden beneath Ludo's tail. No one mentioned the strip. It seemed unwise to challenge the only successful part of the morning's operation. Aldergrave Keep rose above the pine forest an hour later. Dark stone towers stood against a clear autumn sky. Copper roofs caught the sun, and green banners moved above the gatehouse. Calista had delivered meat to the outer kitchens twice. She had never passed the second gate. Today, all three opened. Servants filled the inner courtyard. Relief spread through them when the princes appeared at the carriage door. The relief became confusion when Nilo jumped into Callista's arms. He weighed more than expected. She caught him with a grunt. Ludo trotted behind her, still carrying contraband. Bryn walked at her left side with the alertness of a small commander entering enemy territory. Cormac descended last. Whispers moved around the courtyard. The king silenced them with one look. The Beta introduced himself as Oswin Creel while leading them through the Western Passage. He managed palace administration, council schedules, and problems that refused simpler departments. Calista surveyed the pups. "You have had a busy night." Oswin's expression remained dry. The princes escaped, the king threatened 3 gates, and Captain Osric searched a fountain. Why a fountain? Prince Ludo hid there last spring. The red-brown pup looked proud. They reached the royal nursery overlooking a sunny, enclosed garden. Calista had expected cold stone and formal furniture. Instead, she found warm rugs, low shelves, painted wooden animals, and 3 beds shaped like small boats. Nothing looked cruel. That mattered. The problem was not visible abuse. It was something quieter, hidden beneath attractive bowls and accurate-looking ledgers. A gray-haired governess waited near the hearth. Mistress Mora Quillen bowed to the king, then reached toward Nilo. The black pup climbed over Callista's shoulder. Mora's face tightened. They have become very disobedient. Bryn moved between her and the younger pups. Calista lowered Nilo to the rug. Hungry children rarely improve through criticism. The governess looked at her apron. "And you are?" "The owner of the meat they stole." Ludo chose that moment to drop his venison strip. It landed with a soft slap. Mora stared at it. Calista smiled politely. "Some evidence traveled with us." Cormac ordered the nursery's current food brought in untouched. A kitchen maid arrived with a covered tray and trembling hands. Calista asked her to set it on the examination table. The same minced squares appeared beneath the lids. Calista checked each portion. All contained excessive grain and cheap fat. One included fragments of dried beet pulp used to add color. Oswin compared the delivery seal with the supplier list. "The nursery receives from Crown Provision House," he reported. "The contract specifies game from the king's northern preserves." Calista lifted a fragment toward the window. "This deer was penned and grain-fed. The fat is too pale for northern wild game." Cormac looked toward Mora. "Who accepts delivery?" The governess named Deputy Provisioner Denton Pike. He inspected every nursery crate before kitchen staff received it. "And the children's uneaten portions?" Calista asked. Mora said attendants returned them to the lower scullery for disposal. Oswin turned a page. The reports state every portion was consumed. The kitchen maid went paler, Cormac noticed. "Speak." The maid looked toward Mora, then the closed door. She admitted the bowls often returned nearly full. Deputy Pike instructed the staff to mark them empty because royal heirs could not appear difficult before the harvest assembly. Mora objected that she knew nothing about false records. Calista believed her surprise, though not her judgment. The governess had seen shrinking children and accepted paperwork over observation. Cormac's jaw hardened. "Where is Pike?" Oswin answered that the deputy had gone to inspect the southern cold houses that morning. The timing interested everyone. Nilo climbed onto the examination table and pushed one bad portion toward Cormac. The king looked at the bowl. His son looked at him. Cormac broke off a piece and ate it. He chewed twice. His face became a monument to regret. Ludo sat down, visibly delighted. Calista handed the king a cloth. "Your Majesty has now confirmed the grain." Cormac swallowed with effort. "And the boot." "There is no boot. The flavor implies one." Oswin wrote that down. The pups watched their father eat the food they had rejected. Some of Bryn's stiffness eased. Cormac pushed every bowl away. "Nothing from the nursery stores will be served until the inspection ends." The decision created a practical problem. 3 hungry princes required lunch. Calista asked for fresh venison in an unopened cut, marrow bones, clean root vegetables, and plain oats. She also requested access to the nursery hearth. The royal kitchen sent 6 cooks. Calista dismissed 5. The 6th, a young beta named Tessa Morrow, remained because she answered questions without pretending certainty. Together, they trimmed the venison, checked the liver, and prepared a rich broth without disguising herbs. Cormac stayed near the doorway. He had removed his coat, but not the tension from his shoulders. Calista cut small pieces for the pups. Before serving them, she tasted the broth and handed the spoon to Cormac. He tasted it too. Bryn watched both adults. Then the pale pup approached. He inspected his brother's bowls before his own. Calista moved all 3 close together. "You can supervise while eating." Bryn lowered his head. The nursery filled with quiet chewing. Cormac stood beside Calista. His arm nearly touched hers. Pine, clean wool, and the cold outside air clung to him. "How long does this kind of weight loss take?" he asked. "Weeks, not days." His face tightened. Calista kept her voice measured. "You received false reports. That explains why you missed part of it." "Not all of it." She looked at him. Cormac watched Bryn give 1 piece of liver to Nilo. "I saw him doing that at dinner. I thought he disliked liver." "He was feeding his brother." The king's hand closed over the back of a chair. Calista understood guilt. It often arrived after the danger, when the body finally had time to count every sign. "You can notice the next thing," she said. Cormac met her eyes. The intensity there shifted away from command. It became something quieter and more personal. "Will you help me?" Calista watched the 3 bowls becoming clean. "For 7 days." Oswin entered at that moment with a contract already drafted. Calista stared at him. The beta lifted one shoulder. "I noticed the next thing professionally." Her consultant agreement required less than an hour to revise. Calista added independent access to supply ledgers, protection for her smokehouse, control over food testing, and full payment for lost business. Cormac read every clause. She added one more. Damage caused by royal children would be paid at replacement value. The king glanced toward Ludo. Ludo was chewing the corner of a cushion. Cormac signed. Calista began work that afternoon. The nursery pantry contained excellent jars, polished bins, and almost no honest food. Premium labels covered sacks of cheap oats. 2 venison crates held shoulder scraps beneath a top layer of fine cuts. The liver supply had been stretched with beef lung. Someone had designed the substitutions to survive casual inspection. Calista did not inspect casually. She took samples from the top, center, and bottom of every container. Tessa sealed them in numbered paper. Oswin recorded witnesses. Captain Osric stationed guards at both doors. The 3 pups followed the investigation. Bryn walked beside Calista with solemn purpose. Ludo attempted to inspect every open sack with his mouth. Nilo climbed into an empty basket and became unavailable for further duties. Calista pointed at the basket. "Is that prince assigned to inventory?" Cormac had entered behind them. "He specializes in containment." Nilo curled into a ball. "The container appears occupied. A thorough specialist." The king's dry answer surprised her into a laugh. Cormac looked at her as if the sound had touched him. For one breath, the pantry felt smaller. Then Ludo sneezed into an oat sack. A pale cloud covered his face. Bryn stared at his brother with exhausted leadership. Calista handed Cormac a cloth. Your deputy inspector requires maintenance. The Alpha King knelt and wiped Ludo's muzzle. The pup tried to eat the cloth. Cormac gently removed it. That is not venison. Ludo disagreed through determined chewing. Calista continued sampling while father and son negotiated textile consumption. At the bottom of the second crate, she found the first useful clue. The wood carried a faint violet-gray stain. It came from alder smoke mixed with crushed mountainberry. Crown Provision House used clean oak by contract. Calista knew only 3 commercial smoke yards that used the cheaper alder mixture. One stood beside the Southern River Market. She scraped the residue into a glass vial. Cormac watched her label it. Can smoke identify a supplier? Not alone. It can narrow the route. You sound disappointed that smoke cannot testify. Calista sealed the vial. Smoke is more reliable than several merchants I know. His mouth curved. Calista noticed that Cormac's smile appeared slowly, as if it required permission from a neglected part of him. It changed his severe face in ways that felt professionally irrelevant. She returned to the crate. By evening, the inspection had produced 11 mismatched seals, 4 false labels, and 1 prince asleep in the basket. With Calista beside them, all 3 pups allowed the royal physician to complete a proper examination. He confirmed undernourishment but found no poison, infection, or lasting organ damage. Proper food and rest should restore them. That news loosened the palace. It did not loosen Bryn. The pale pup still positioned himself between every adult and his brothers. When attendants approached with blankets, he watched their hands. When Cormac entered, Bryn allowed him closer but remained alert. Calista sat on the nursery rug after supper. Nilo slept against her thigh. Ludo lay upside down near the hearth, all 4 paws pointing toward the ceiling. Bryn remained awake by the door. Cormac sat in a low chair opposite him. Neither moved. Calista looked from father to son. This could take a while. Cormac's gaze stayed on Bryn. He used to sleep beside my desk. Before the food problem? Before their mother died. The answer changed the room. Queen Alice had died of winter fever 2 years earlier. The kingdom knew the official mourning dates. Calista had never considered the 3 small bodies living inside them. Cormac explained that Bryn began guarding his brothers after the funeral. The king allowed it because the role seemed to give his eldest son stability. Then council demands increased. Cormac moved the children into a structured nursery schedule. He visited at breakfast and before bed, but attendants managed everything between. 3 months ago, preparations began for the harvest assembly. The princes were expected to appear publicly in both forms, their days filled with lessons, fittings, and controlled meals. The stolen rations fit inside that pressure. Someone knew rushed officials would trust sealed records. Calista stroked Nilo's warm back. Bryn is not only guarding them from danger, he believes he is responsible for everything they need. Cormac's expression darkened with pain. That was my responsibility. Then take it back gradually. The king looked at her. How? Start with breakfast. I attend dawn council. Calista indicated the sleeping pups. Breakfast appears more difficult. His eyes warmed. You speak to kings as if they are late apprentices. Late apprentices improve when given knives. Cormac frowned. That sounds like a threat. Tomorrow it becomes a cooking lesson. Cormac looked almost alarmed. Bryn lowered his head onto his paws. It was the first time he had relaxed while his father remained in the room. Calista noticed. Cormac did too. Neither spoke. The fire settled with a soft crackle. Pine smoke and broth lingered in the warm nursery. Beyond the windows, evening wind moved through the enclosed garden. Calista planned to return to her smokehouse after the pups slept. Nilo woke when she shifted her leg. The black pup climbed into her lap and hooked both paws around her apron. Ludo rolled upright and placed his body across her boots. Bryn moved from the door to her other side. Calista found herself secured by 3 royal children using methods unavailable to ordinary contracts. Cormac studied the arrangement. They appear to have invoked an extension. This is unlawful pressure. Cormac offered, I can summon the royal judge. Will the judge remove them? Nilo tightened his paws. Cormac considered the evidence. The court may lack jurisdiction. Calista stayed in the palace guest room beside the nursery. At midnight, she woke to a scratching noise at her door. She opened it and found Bryn sitting in the corridor. The pale pup held a folded kitchen schedule in his mouth. Calista took the paper. It was not evidence of sophisticated investigation. The schedule smelled strongly of venison fat because someone had wrapped a meat hook in it. Bryn had followed the scent. Still, the page listed nursery deliveries at the Eastern Service Gate. Every false ration shipment arrived during the same 2-hour window. Calista crouched. Did you use that gate? Bryn's ears lifted. She drew a simple map with her finger on the floor. Nursery. Corridor. Gate. Smokehouse. The pup touched the gate with one paw, then traced toward the smokehouse. He had not solved a conspiracy. He had remembered an escape route. Calista examined the schedule. A delivery tunnel connected the eastern pantry to the old carriage sheds. The pups could have followed the smell of her juniper smoke from wagons that supplied the guard stations. Bryn nudged the paper toward her. Then he looked toward his brother's room. You found food, Calista whispered. You brought them with you. The pale pup lowered his head. She touched the floor beside her instead of reaching for him. Bryn stepped into the offered space. Calista sat with him in the corridor until his body stopped trembling. At dawn, Cormac found them asleep against the wall. Bryn's head rested on Callista's knee. Her hand lay open beside his paw. The delivery schedule remained on the floor between them. The king stood without waking either of them. Oswin arrived with council papers and discovered Cormac still there 20 minutes later. The grain committee is waiting, the beta murmured. Cormac looked at his sleeping son. They may continue. Oswin examined Calista, Bryn, and the grease-marked schedule. Has the corridor become a council chamber? It has produced more useful evidence than the Eastern Hall. The beta left to disappoint the grain committee. Cormac removed his cloak and laid it over Callista's shoulders. She woke beneath the scent of pine and cold air. The Alpha King was crouched close enough for her to see the green near the center of his amber eyes. Good morning, he said quietly. Calista became aware of the cloak, her untidy hair, and Bryn sleeping against her leg. Did I miss the cooking lesson? I was hoping you had forgotten. His voice carried dry warmth. She smiled before caution returned. Kings do not escape instruction through attractive cloaks. Cormac's gaze rested on her mouth for one brief, unmistakable moment. Attractive? Calista pulled the cloak closer against the morning chill. The garment. Naturally. He stood and offered his hand. She took it. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong. The contact lasted only long enough to help her rise. It still changed her breathing. Cormac noticed. The satisfaction in his eyes was subtle. Calista decided the king needed immediate access to onions. Then she remembered the princes could not eat them. She settled for handing him an apron. The garment was pale yellow and embroidered with 3 dancing carrots. Cormac held it at arm's length. This belongs to the nursery cook. This belongs to whoever is preparing breakfast. Oswin entered with the delayed grain report. He saw the apron. The beta slowly turned around. Stay, Cormac ordered. Oswin stopped. If this reaches the council, I will classify it as agricultural leadership. Calista tied the carrot apron around Cormac's waist. The first true royal cooking lesson began with a knife, a venison roast, and 3 wolf pups sitting in a row to judge their father. Cormac held the knife correctly. That was the last uncomplicated success for some time. Calista showed him how to cut across the grain. The king produced slices of such rigid equality that Oswin could have used them to settle a border dispute. Food does not require matching edges, she told him. Cormac examined the board. Unequal portions create unequal expectations. They also allow a 4-year-old to finish breakfast. Nilo wagged at the mention of breakfast. The king adjusted his next cut. It came out too thick. Ludo attempted to steal it. Cormac caught the red-brown pup around the middle and lifted him away from the table. Ludo continued running in the air, paws moving with determined optimism. "You are a prince," Cormac reminded him. The pup stretched his neck toward the meat. "That argument lacks influence," Calista observed. Cormac tucked Ludo beneath one arm and kept cutting. The sight should not have been attractive. He wore a carrot apron. One sun hung against his side like stolen luggage. A smear of broth marked his sleeve. It was still attractive. Calista blamed the competent way he controlled the knife. Her Omega instincts blamed his shoulders. Neither explanation improved her concentration. She stepped behind him and adjusted his wrist. Her fingers covered the back of his hand. His body went still. Cormac's scent deepened around them. The nursery kitchen suddenly felt warmer than the stove justified. "Relax your grip," Calista instructed. "That advice has failed in every council I have attended. The venison is not negotiating with you." His thumb shifted beneath hers. "You seem confident." "I have defeated larger cuts." Cormac turned his head. Their faces came close. His eyes lowered briefly toward her lips. Calista felt the movement like contact. The air held the clean scent of raw meat, warming broth, and the alpha standing against her. Ludo licked Cormac's jaw. The king endured this with lowered eyelids. Calista stepped back before laughter damaged the knife lesson. "Your assistant requires attention." Cormac lowered Ludo to the floor. "My assistant is dismissed." Ludo immediately stole a carrot. Bryn watched the entire exchange from near the hearth. His pale ears remained forward. He had not approached his father yet, but he no longer placed himself between Cormac and the younger pups. The king noticed that change and wisely did not celebrate it. Breakfast reached the table 40 minutes later. Cormac's venison slices varied in size, but they were fresh and properly cooked. Calista added warm oat mash with marrow broth. The pups sniffed every bowl. Cormac ate first. Bryn watched him swallow, then lowered his head to eat. The king's shoulders eased. Ludo swallowed a carrot piece whole and looked surprised by his own decision. Nilo climbed into Cormac's lap halfway through breakfast. The black pup did not ask permission. He simply placed both front paws on the king's knee, turned twice, and settled against his stomach. Cormac stopped breathing. Calista ate her own breakfast without drawing attention to it. Oswin displayed similar restraint while opening the grain committee report upside down. The king rested one hand on Nilo's back. His fingers moved carefully through the soft black fur. Across the table, Bryn observed. The pale leader took another bite. After breakfast, Calista followed the eastern delivery route. The corridor descended from the nursery pantry to a covered loading court. An old ventilation passage continued beneath the carriage sheds and opened near the outer wall. Captain Osric found a loose grate behind stacked firewood. Small paw marks crossed the dust. The pups had escaped without help. Bryn had likely watched deliveries and learned the route. Once outside, the three followed the scent of juniper smoke toward Callista's village. Cormac examined the gap. He moved the firewood. Calista studied the scrape marks. All three moved it. Bryn planned. Ludo pushed. Nilo probably sat somewhere inconvenient. The black pup was currently sitting inside Osric's helmet. The captain held it at waist height while Nilo peered over the rim. An accurate assessment, Osric admitted. The grate was repaired with an emergency latch placed high above a child's reach. Cormac also ordered safe interior access during fires. Calista approved the second instruction more than the first. Locking children inside was not protection. The investigation moved to the main provision hall. Deputy Pike remained absent. His office assistant claimed he had extended the southern inspection due to bridge damage. No bridge report existed. Oswin opened Pike's ledgers. On paper, every shipment was excellent. Northern preserve seals matched weight receipts. Crown Provision House delivered on time. Nursery portions exceeded the physician's requirements. The prince's weekly weight entries repeated the same figures, confirming that Pike's reassuring reports were invented. Calista compared the numbers with physical stock. The mismatch was enormous. The palace should have held 400 pounds of prime venison. It contained less than 100 pounds of usable meat. The rest was grain, cheap trimming, and substitute fat. Someone had sold the missing meat elsewhere. Calista checked the cold room hooks. Fine cuts left different pressure marks than mixed crates. Several hooks bore fresh scratches, despite records claiming no removal. She asked for the discarded wrapping cloths. The scullery had burned most of them. One remained beneath a cleaning bucket. Its inner surface carried oak smoke and northern pine. The outer surface carried the same violet alder residue found in the nursery crate. The cloth had wrapped genuine northern venison first. Later, someone reused it around substitute meat from the southern river yards. Cormac stood beside her in the cold room. Frost clouded his breath. His black coat brushed her shoulder whenever they leaned over the cloth. "Can you prove the order of use?" he asked. Calista showed him the grease layers. Fine game fat had soaked deeply into the weave. The violet smoke dust rested near the surface. The genuine meat came first. The substitute came later. "Someone removed the good cuts after royal inspection." Calista nodded. "That is my working conclusion." His gaze moved over her face. "You avoid certainty when evidence remains incomplete. It keeps innocent people out of prison." "A useful habit near kings," Calista added. "A rare one near councils." The cold sharpened his scent, pine and winter rain. Calista became aware that their shoulders still touched. Cormac did not move away. Neither did she. The door opened. Oswin entered, saw them bent together over a stained cloth, and paused. "Should I return when the evidence is less intimate?" Calista straightened. Cormac remained exactly where he was. "Report." The beta's eyes showed satisfaction unavailable to his voice. He had found duplicate wagon numbers. The genuine shipments entered the palace at dawn. Wagons bearing the same numbers left through the west gate before noon, officially empty. Gate weights proved otherwise. The outgoing wagons carried nearly as much as they brought. Their destinations were omitted. Calista requested copies of the axle measurements. Commercial wagons left characteristic track widths and wheel repairs. Her suppliers used them to identify carts during crowded markets. Oswin looked impressed. Cormac looked pleased that Oswin looked impressed. That pleased Calista more than it should have. They left the cold room with samples and a plan to inspect the Riverside Trading District. The three princes were waiting in the hall. Bryn sat upright at the center. Ludo had a wooden spoon. Nilo wore Captain Osric's helmet like an overturned bucket. Mistress Mora stood behind them with the tired expression of someone losing a jurisdictional dispute. "They refused their rest period," she reported. Calista eyed the spoon. "They appear equipped for inspection." Cormac crouched. "You are staying here." Bryn picked up Callista's sample case strap. The king and the pup faced each other. Calista waited. Cormac did not command him. Instead, he explained that the market would be crowded and unsafe. He promised to return before supper. He also promised to bring back information, not food. Ludo dropped the spoon. The king amended the promise to include food. Bryn released the strap. Cormac offered his open hand. After a long pause, the pale pup touched it with one paw. The severity left Cormac's face. "Guard them here," he told Bryn. The pup's chest lifted. Calista understood the strategy. Cormac was not taking responsibility from Bryn all at once. He was narrowing it into a child-sized task. They left the pups with Tessa, Mora, and 2 guards. At the outer gate, Calista found an unmarked carriage and plain traveling cloaks. Cormac intended to inspect the market without announcing himself. This plan failed before they reached the first stall. The king wore a brown cloak, no crown, and ordinary boots. He still walked like roads had been constructed for his arrival. Vendors bowed as he passed. Cormac frowned. "How do they know?" Calista examined his posture. "You look as if you are about to audit the horizon." Oswin added that the 6 discreet guards were also a clue. Cormac dismissed 4. The remaining 2 attempted to look like spice merchants. Neither knew the price of pepper. The southern river market stretched beneath red canvas awnings. Fishmongers shouted near the water. Carts crowded the stone lanes. Smoke from cook fires mixed with tar, river mud, apples, and cured meat. Calista led them toward the commercial smoke yards. She stopped at 3 stalls and purchased small samples. Cormac tried to pay the first merchant with a royal gold mark. The woman nearly dropped her scale. Calista exchanged it for copper from her own purse. "You are poor at being ordinary," she told him. "I have limited practice. Your cloak costs more than my drying shed." Cormac protested. It was described as plain. Oswin inspected the embroidery. Plain royalty. They found the violet smoke at the 4th yard. Riverbend Curing Works occupied a long brick building behind the fish stalls. Alder logs burned in shallow pits. Crushed mountainberry darkened the smoke and gave meat an attractive color. Calista asked to see the owner. A broad, human merchant named Vessa Dern came from the office wiping her hands. She recognized Cormac immediately and considered fleeing through a wall. Calista introduced herself before royal fear destroyed the interview. She requested purchase records for Crown Provision House. Vessa denied selling to the palace. Calista held up the violet residue. The merchant denied that too. Behind her, a worker rolled a crate into the yard. Its side carried a partially scraped crowned pine mark. Vessa closed her eyes. The crate contained low-grade shoulder meat prepared to resemble premium venison. Riverbend had sold it legally to a middle buyer named Vale Table Company. The buyer supplied taverns, work camps, and institutions with limited budgets. Vessa produced invoices. Every 3rd delivery went to a warehouse leased by Crown Provision House. The quantities matched the palace shortages. Cormac asked who collected them. Vessa identified Denton Pike's personal wagon master. Oswin copied the invoices while Calista examined the curing process. The meat was not spoiled. Riverbend had labeled it accurately when sold. Someone else replaced the tags. That distinction protected innocent workers. Cormac listened when Calista explained it. He ordered Vessa's records secured but did not close the yard. The workers kept their jobs. Vessa looked at Calista with startled gratitude. Outside the office, Cormac adjusted his plain royal cloak. "You prevented me from arresting half a smoke yard." "Half a smoke yard did not steal from you." Cormac counted. "Only 1 deputy and several merchants." "We have evidence against Pike's wagon master. We still need proof Pike directed him." Cormac watched the river traffic. "You continue disappointing my desire for immediate conclusions." "I offer delayed accuracy." "Is that available in other areas?" The question carried a warmth unrelated to meat. Calista looked at him. His amber-green eyes held hers with quiet challenge. "Your Majesty," she replied, "you have known me for less than 2 days. Then delayed accuracy appears appropriate." Oswin walked ahead with the invoices. His shoulders suggested he had heard everything. They inspected 3 high-priced restaurants before returning to the palace. 2 had purchased Northern Preserve venison through Vale Table Company. The cuts carried official palace inspection notches. The 3rd restaurant had served one at a private dinner for senior provisioners. Denton Pike attended that dinner every month. Calista collected samples and receipts. Cormac paid for lunch using copper this time. He looked proud of himself. The server still bowed until her forehead nearly touched the table. Back at the palace, the princes met them in the courtyard. Nilo reached Cormac first. The black pup ran into his legs and bounced backward. Cormac caught him before he fell. Ludo circled Calista, sniffing every pocket for promised food. Bryn approached last. Cormac knelt and reported that they had found the wrong smoke yard, 2 invoices, and no lunch suitable for princes. Bryn listened with his head tilted. The king reached into his cloak and produced 3 plain venison strips from Callista's approved supply. Ludo's faith in monarchy returned immediately. Cormac gave the first piece to Bryn. The pale pup took it. He carried it toward his brothers. Then he stopped, turned, and returned to his father. Bryn placed one end of the strip on Cormac's knee, an invitation to share. The king broke off a small piece and ate it. Bryn ate the rest beside him. Calista looked away to give Cormac privacy. His hand found hers at his side. The contact surprised both of them. He did not grip. He only touched his fingers to hers, gratitude passing through the brief warmth. Calista curled her smallest finger around his. Oswin began discussing invoices with unusual volume. That evening, the palace kitchen prepared a proper meal under Callista's supervision. Tessa used fresh ingredients from sealed reserve stores. Every bowl was tasted in front of the pups. They ate until their stomachs rounded gently. Ludo then attempted to eat Cormac's napkin. Recovery had not improved his standards. After supper, the princes shifted into human form for the first time since their escape. The transformations came in soft bursts of amber light. Paws became hands. Fur receded into skin and hair. Their shift clothes reformed around small bodies. Bryn appeared as a thin 8-year-old with pale blonde hair and blue-gray eyes. Ludo became a 6-year-old with auburn curls and freckles. 4-year-old Nilo had black hair sticking in every direction. Nilo looked at Calista. "You smell like the good room." Calista crouched. "Which room?" "Meat," Ludo corrected him. "Smokehouse." Nilo considered the longer word and rejected it. Bryn remained near his brothers. His small face carried the same serious expression as his wolf form. Cormac sat on the rug to reduce his height. "Why did you leave?" he asked. Bryn glanced at Mora and the attendants. The king dismissed everyone except Calista and Oswin. Once the doors closed, Bryn explained. The meals had tasted worse each week. When they complained, Deputy Pike told the nursery staff that royal children must not become spoiled. He claimed the king approved strict portions before the assembly. Cormac's scent sharpened. Bryn continued carefully. Nilo cried from hunger at night. Ludo began stealing oatcakes from servants. Bryn watched the eastern delivery gate and smelled venison smoke on the guard wagons. He found the loose grate during a garden game. The night they escaped, he meant to bring back food and return before dawn. Ludo admitted they became distracted by the large haunch. Nilo added that the window attacked them. Calista kept her face serious. Cormac did not manage the same achievement. His laugh escaped low and startled. The boys stared at him. Then Nilo laughed too. Ludo joined because laughter required no evidence. Bryn's mouth finally curved. The king's amusement faded into grief. "I never approved smaller portions." Bryn looked at him. "Pike said you needed us thin for the assembly." Cormac went still. Calista had heard similar lies in guild kitchens. Cruel instructions carried more authority when placed inside an absent ruler's mouth. Cormac moved closer without touching Bryn. "I need you healthy. I need you fed. No public ceremony matters more." Bryn's chin trembled once. He controlled it. The king opened his arms. Nilo entered them first. Ludo followed sideways and nearly knocked his father over. Bryn remained apart for one long breath. Then the pale-haired boy stepped into the embrace. Cormac held all three. Calista felt tears sting her eyes. Oswin examined the fireplace with fierce administrative interest. The family stayed on the rug until Nilo began snoring against Cormac's chest. Calista rose to leave. Bryn lifted his head. "Will you come tomorrow?" "I have 6 more contract days." Ludo frowned. "What happens after 6? Calista looked at Cormac. The king's features had become unreadable. "After 6, she answered, your kitchen should know how to feed you without supervision." Nilo woke enough to object. "Father needs supervision." Cormac looked offended. Calista remembered the carrot apron. "That remains under review." The next morning brought the first newspaper rumor. The Alpha King's Mystery Omega entered the palace after 3 runaway princes and remained overnight. The article proposed she was a secret nanny, a rural healer, or the king's hidden fiancé. No one guessed meat inspector. Calista read the paper over breakfast. Cormac sat across from her wearing his usual black coat. Bryn occupied the chair beside him. Ludo and Nilo had returned to wolf form and were sharing a cushion. "Hidden fiancé seems ambitious," Calista observed. The king buttered toast. "You have already revised 1 royal contract. Consultation agreements rarely involve rings. That may explain why Oswin opposed the jewelry clause." The beta lowered his tea. "There was no jewelry clause." Cormac looked at Calista. "A serious omission." Heat touched her face. The king noticed. His smile appeared without delay this time. Bryn watched them both. "Are you flirting?" he asked. The toast slipped from Cormac's knife. Calista drank her tea. Oswin answered for the table. "The evidence remains preliminary." Bryn accepted that because he respected proper investigation. Ludo stole the fallen toast. By noon, the hidden fiancé rumor had reached Calista's smokehouse. Her apprentice sent a note reporting 14 curious customers and one woman requesting the same venison that attracted kings. Calista needed to return and manage production. The pups objected. Bryn proposed accompanying her as security. Ludo proposed carrying samples. Nilo proposed meat. Cormac considered the crowd likely waiting outside her shop. "I will escort you. That will reduce curiosity." "You sound doubtful." Calista reminded him, "Your last disguise caused a merchant to bow into a cabbage." The king selected a closed carriage instead. All three princes came too. When the royal carriage stopped outside Vennor Smokehouse, half the village found reasons to stand nearby. Calista's apprentice, a practical young human named Ferris Cole, held the door with an expression of complete betrayal. "You left for one inspection." Calista stepped down. The inspection multiplied. 3 pups jumped after her. Cormac followed. Ferris looked at the Alpha King. Significantly. The smokehouse smelled of juniper, clean wood, and the morning's new venison. Calista relaxed as soon as she entered. Every hook and scale belonged where she placed it. Cormac noticed the change. At the palace, she occupied borrowed authority. Here, she owned the room. Customers watched from the front counter while Calista checked the smoking racks. Cormac stood near the cutting table, too large and too royal for the modest space. Nilo returned to the scene of the crime and sniffed the repaired window. Ludo inspected the new haunch hanging above it. Bryn sat beneath the hook and guarded his brothers from themselves. Calista reviewed orders with Ferris. The palace consultation had delayed 2 deliveries. She began trimming a fresh shoulder while explaining which cuts needed priority. Cormac moved closer. "What can I do?" Every customer became silent. Calista handed the Alpha King a basket of wood chips. "Carry these to the rear stove." The village watched its ruler carry alder chips through a smokehouse. The hidden fiancé rumor became a labor arrangement by supper. Cormac returned for a second basket. Calista looked at his clean hands. "Have you ever worked near smoke? Battle camps. That is fire with shouting." Cormac countered, "Council is a table with shouting. You have broad definitions. You have broad baskets." Their eyes met. The attraction between them had gained familiarity. It no longer startled Calista. It waited beneath each practical exchange, warm and increasingly difficult to classify as accidental. Cormac took the basket from her. His fingers brushed hers. "You could visit after the shop closes," she murmured. His gaze sharpened. "For inspection?" "The proof remains incomplete." Cormac's quiet laugh followed him toward the stove. Bryn looked at Oswin. The beta shook his head. "Still preliminary." That afternoon, Calista and Ferris compared the palace samples with Riverbend products. Cormac kept Nilo away from the scales while learning enough to ask useful questions. The tests confirmed that prime venison had left the crates after inspection. Riverbend meat entered them before nursery delivery, a switch requiring Pike's cold house access. Calista also discovered that Cormac looked unfairly attractive with his sleeves rolled above his forearms. That finding did not enter the report. They still needed proof that Pike had ordered the exchange. They needed the deputy's payment records or instructions to his wagon master. Oswin brought news near sunset. Pike had returned to the capital but claimed illness at his townhouse. Captain Osric placed guards nearby. The king wanted an immediate search. Oswin reminded him that Pike's office fell under guild privilege. A warrant required evidence beyond business contact. Calista examined the duplicate wagon receipts again. One carried a small punched triangle beside the weight. She recognized the mark. It belonged to a portable scale maintained by the Royal Provisioners Guild. Guild scales received unique calibration punches every season. Pike's official scale used a circle. Someone else had weighed the stolen meat. Calista checked restaurant receipts. The same triangle appeared on all three. Oswin consulted the guild registry. The register named Guild Auditor Tressa Vale as the owner of the triangle mark. Tressa supervised contract compliance and had approved Pike's accounts for 2 years. The conspiracy widened. Cormac watched the dying daylight beyond the smokehouse windows. "We have enough for warrants against both," Oswin agreed. Captain Osric left with signed orders. Calista sealed the samples. The workday's tension drained from her shoulders, leaving fatigue behind. The customers had gone. Ferris took the 3 princes upstairs to eat approved stew in Callista's small kitchen. Only Cormac remained in the workroom. Juniper smoke curled through the rafters. Sunset turned the wooden walls honey gold. The cooling stove clicked softly. Calista leaned against the cutting table. "Your sons are recovering." "Because of you," Calista corrected him. "Because they are being fed." Cormac came closer. "You found what everyone else accepted. I knew where to look." That is generally how expertise works. The respect in his voice warmed her more deeply than praise. He stopped an arm's length away. "The newspaper will become worse. I have survived being called a rural mystery," Cormac warned. "Tomorrow they may call you ambitious." Calista understood the warning. An Omega professional near an unmarried king would be accused of climbing, seducing, or manipulating. Her evidence might be dismissed as a romantic favor. "Will you dismiss me to protect the investigation?" Cormac's expression hardened. "No." The answer came with enough alpha force to stir the hanging herbs. Then he controlled it. "I will state that you serve under an independent contract," he continued. "Your findings will be verified by neutral examiners." "And the flirting?" Cormac's eyes darkened. Calista had not intended to say it aloud. The smokehouse became very quiet. He moved 1 step closer. "Would you prefer I deny that?" Her pulse quickened. Cormac could hear it. The awareness warmed his gaze. Calista lifted her chin. "I prefer accurate reports. Then I should gather more evidence." His hand rose slowly. He did not touch her. His fingers stopped near a loose curl beside her cheek, asking permission without words. Calista nodded. Cormac tucked the curl behind her ear. His knuckles brushed her skin. Heat moved through the small contact. He leaned closer. The smokehouse door burst open. Ludo ran in carrying a meat hook by its wooden handle. Ferris followed in horror. "He took it from the wall." Cormac stepped away from Calista and intercepted his son. Ludo shifted into human form mid-run. An auburn-haired boy slid across the sawdust in his shift clothes, still gripping the hook. The king lifted him by the waist. "Tools are not prizes." Ludo pointed toward the kitchen. "Nilo has the gravy spoon." Cormac handed the hook to Ferris. "One emergency at a time." Calista covered her smile. Their almost kiss joined the investigation as unresolved evidence. The royal warrants produced immediate results. Tressa Vale's guild office contained duplicate scales, restaurant contracts, and coded payment ledgers. Pike's townhouse contained an official cold house key he had reported lost. Neither suspect remained at home. They had left the city together through the western gate less than an hour before Osric arrived. Their carriage headed toward the harvest assembly grounds. The assembly would open in 5 days. Temporary kitchens, cold tents, and merchant halls already filled the moonfield outside the capital. Thousands of crates moved there without ordinary palace checks. It was an ideal place to hide stolen stock or destroy records. Cormac ordered the gates watched without public alarm. Arresting respected guild officers before the evidence was secured could cause every accomplice to scatter. Calista extended her contract by 5 days. She pretended the decision concerned unfinished work. Cormac pretended to believe her. The princes did not pretend at all. Nilo hugged her knees. Ludo asked whether 5 days included 5 breakfasts. Bryn quietly moved her guest room slippers from the doorway back beneath the bed. The pale leader had developed strong opinions about departures. The next 5 days began before sunrise and ended after the palace clocks became accusatory. Calista divided her time between the nursery, smokehouse, and assembly grounds. Cormac attended councils in the morning, inspected evidence by afternoon, and appeared in her workroom after supper with increasingly weak official reasons. On the first night, he brought Cold House records. On the second, he brought a broken crate seal. On the third, he brought strawberries. Calista studied the fruit, then him. Does this concern the provision investigation? Cormac pulled off his gloves. They were provisioned. For whom? The consultant who extended her contract. His tone stayed formal. His eyes did not. Calista accepted one strawberry. This may be interpreted as influence. Then eat the evidence. She bit into the fruit while watching him. The king's gaze followed her mouth. Evidence appears effective, he murmured. Calista nearly dropped the berry. Cormac smiled with the composed satisfaction of a man discovering a new weapon. Their flirting developed in the spaces between work. It remained careful because Calista still served under contract. Neither wanted attraction to compromise the investigation or her professional authority. Care did not make it mild. Cormac stood too close when reviewing sample labels. Calista corrected his grip during every cooking lesson, even after he learned it. His hand found the small of her back in crowded corridors, always protective and always lingering one heartbeat beyond necessity. The princes noticed everything. Bryn maintained an internal evidence file. Ludo asked direct questions. Nilo began calling strawberries courtship meat. Oswin attempted to correct the category once. No one supported him. The boys gained strength quickly on proper meals. Their coats became glossier. Nilo stopped trembling after long shifts. Ludo's energy increased from considerable to structurally relevant. Bryn recovered more quietly. He still checked his brother's bowls, but he no longer gave away half his food. He allowed Cormac to sit beside him at breakfast. On the fourth morning, he asked his father to cut Nilo's meat smaller. Cormac obeyed without turning the request into ceremony. Afterward, Bryn shifted into wolf form and rested one pale paw on the king's boot. Cormac continued reading council notes as if nothing extraordinary had happened. The page remained unchanged for 10 minutes. Calista did not expose him. She only placed another cup of tea near his hand. The harvest assembly grounds occupied the broad moon field south of the capital. Colored tents formed streets around a central timber hall. Farmers brought grain, livestock, honey, preserves, and winter cloth. Guilds displayed products beneath carved signs. Smoke from 30 cooking fires drifted above the field. Calista could smell the provision fraud before reaching the gate. The violet alder mixture came from the western cold tents. She entered wearing her dark green work dress and a plain guild visitor badge. Cormac accompanied her in another alleged disguise. This cloak was gray. It was also lined with black embroidery and fastened by the crowned pine emblem. Calista touched the clasp. Were you trying to remain unknown? Verena called this understated. Verena dresses ceremonial horses. Cormac observed. They rarely object. They cannot speak in council. An inviolable structure. The king replaced the clasp with a plain leather tie. He still looked royal. They solved the problem by pretending Calista had hired a very large guard. Cormac disliked the role until she ordered him to carry her sample basket. Then he became interested. Do hired guards receive lunch? If they follow instructions. Cormac persisted. And if they perform exceptionally? Calista glanced at him. That depends on the requested reward. His eyes warmed. Delayed accuracy? Her pulse answered before her mouth could. Cormac heard it and looked pleased. They reached the western cold tents with Oswin and 2 actual guards walking at a distance. Calista inspected vendor permits while Cormac carried the basket. Several merchants recognized him. None wanted to be the first to admit it. One called him Master Pine. Cormac accepted the name with remarkable dignity. The first tent held ordinary beef. The second held salted river fish. The third contained stacks of mixed meat crates bearing Vale table labels. Calista checked the wood, seals, and internal temperature. The crates were empty. Fresh grease marked the bottoms. Someone had unloaded them that morning. The tent clerk produced a transfer receipt signed by Tressa Vale. It claimed the meat had spoiled and gone to the rendering pits. Calista examined the residue. Spoiled meat left sour fluid and discoloration. These crates smelled clean. "Where are the pits?" she asked. The clerk pointed east. Cormac lowered the sample basket. "The wind comes from the east." No rendering smell reached them. The clerk reconsidered his employment. He admitted that Pike ordered the crates moved into the central banquet kitchen. The meat had been relabeled as Royal Reserve venison for the assembly opening feast. The fraud was continuing in public. More importantly, the prime stolen cuts had already been sold. Pike planned to use substitute meat at the king's own feast, then blame shortages on Callista's new inspection rules. The clerk had received no share. He followed written orders and feared losing his seasonal wages. Cormac asked to see those orders. The man produced one folded page from his coat. It carried Pike's signature and Tressa's guild seal. Direct proof. Oswin appeared beside them as if summoned by completed paperwork. He secured the order with 2 witnesses. Cormac told the clerk he would keep his wages in exchange for truthful testimony. The man agreed so quickly that his hat fell off. They inspected the banquet kitchen next. Hundreds of workers moved among ovens, carving tables, and stock pots. The air smelled of bread, roasting roots, hot iron, and cheap meat hidden beneath expensive herbs. Calista found the substituted venison in less than 5 minutes. The cooks had marinated it with wine, juniper, and dark berry to mimic wild game. Decorative seals had been pressed into the wrapping after delivery. She ordered the meat held. The banquet master refused. He saw an Omega visitor badge and assumed authority belonged elsewhere. "The feast opens tomorrow," he announced. "No village meat woman will delay 300 tables." Calista showed him her royal contract. He did not read it. Cormac set down the basket. "Read the document." The banquet master glanced at the large hired guard. "Stay outside this discussion." Oswin turned away. Calista almost felt sorry for the man. Cormac removed his gray hood. The kitchen stopped in waves. Knives paused. Pot lids remained lifted. A baker walked into a sack of flour. The banquet master recognized his hired guard. His knees made a private political decision. Cormac caught his elbow before he reached the floor. "The contract," the king reminded him. The man read every word. Calista ordered the substitute meat separated, weighed, and preserved as evidence. Safe portions could later feed workers under their accurate labels. Nothing needed to be wasted. The opening feast would use reserve beef, poultry, and honest local venison purchased at fair emergency rates. Merchants cheered the final part. By sunset, the field knew Master Pine was the Alpha King. Children followed Cormac, asking whether hired guards normally owned kingdoms. One elderly farmer offered him seasonal work lifting turnips. Cormac accepted the farmer's card. Calista laughed all the way to the carriage. Inside, she sat opposite him, while evening light moved over the canvas tents. "You enjoyed that," he accused. "The banquet master asked his king to stay outside authority. He may recover in several years," Calista predicted. "The baker may not recover from the flour." Cormac leaned forward, forearms resting on his knees. "Did my performance earn lunch?" "You carried the basket well." "Exceptionally?" Calista ruled. "Adequately." His eyes narrowed with amusement. "Your standards move whenever I approach them. It encourages growth." "Cruel professional practice." Calista smiled. "You extended my contract. I intend to discuss another kind when this one ends." The words settled between them. Her breath slowed. "What kind?" Cormac's gaze held hers. "One without fees, inspections, or an end date." The carriage wheels rolled over a bridge seam. Callista's knee touched his. Neither moved it. "That sounds poorly defined," she whispered. "I was hoping to negotiate privately." His hand opened between them. Calista placed hers inside it. Cormac drew her across the narrow space until she sat beside him. His arms settled along the seat behind her, not quite touching her shoulders. Heat gathered where their legs pressed together. He looked at her mouth. Calista looked at his. The carriage window opened from outside. Oswin's face appeared. "Your Majesty, Captain Osric has located Pike's carriage." Cormac remained motionless. The beta took in Callista's position, their joined hands, and the distance between their mouths. "I regret the timing professionally." Calista leaned back and laughed. Cormac tipped his face toward the carriage ceiling. "Where?" Pike's abandoned carriage stood behind the guild livestock tents. Its wheel had broken in a drainage ditch. Tressa and Pike were gone. Inside, guards found burned ledger fragments, 2 false seal presses, and a wardrobe trunk. The trunk contained no clothes. It contained prime northern venison packed in ice. Pike had attempted to preserve one last private shipment while burning the records that proved it existed. Calista examined the meat. Palace inspection notches remained visible beneath trimmed edges. The original crate numbers matched missing nursery stock. The recovery mattered emotionally as much as legally. This was the food purchased for the princes. Someone had taken it from children and packed it for sale while those children went hungry. Cormac stood over the trunk in complete silence. His anger changed the air. Nearby horses shifted nervously. Guards lowered their eyes. Alpha power pressed outward before he pulled it back under control. Calista touched his forearm. The muscle beneath her hand was hard as carved wood. "We have it," she said. Cormac looked at her. "Not all of it. Enough to stop the next meal. Enough to charge them when Osric finds them." His breathing eased. He placed his hand over hers. "You should not need to calm me. I am not calming you. I am reminding you that anger has work to do." The king's thumb moved across her knuckles. "You make even correction sound intimate. You hear intimacy whenever I instruct you." Cormac sighed. "An increasingly serious condition." Callista's cheeks warmed. Oswin inspected the burned fragments several yards away and granted them deliberate privacy. The guards traced Pike and Tressa to an inn near the northern bridge. Both were arrested before midnight. Pike carried 3 purses of restaurant payments. Tressa carried the guild's restricted contract book. Neither could explain the venison trunk. The opening assembly feast proceeded the next day with honest food and unexpected simplicity. Roast beef replaced false reserve venison. Local hunters supplied smaller game cuts. Farmers received fair payment before serving began. Calista supervised the central carving station. The 3 princes attended in human form, wearing dark green coats. Bryn's pale hair had been combed neatly. Ludo's auburn curls had rejected all discipline. Nilo wore 1 boot on the wrong foot. Cormac arrived in formal black and green. The boys ran toward him. All 3. The king crouched in the middle of the public field and caught them. Nilo climbed onto his back. Ludo announced that the beef smelled honest. Bryn adjusted Cormac's collar with serious hands. The crowd watched. So did Calista. Cormac met her eyes over Bryn's pale head. Warmth moved through the distance between them. Bryn followed his father's gaze. "Preliminary?" he asked. Cormac's mouth curved. "Developing." The public feast produced several crises unrelated to fraud. A ceremonial goat ate part of the eastern banner. 2 guild masters argued about pumpkin size. Ludo shifted into wolf form beneath the table and emerged with a roast carrot stuck behind one ear. Nilo attempted to exchange his wrong boot for a smoked turkey wing. Calista stopped him before the transaction became binding. Bryn remained beside the carving station, monitoring portions with professional interest. He corrected one server who gave Nilo a piece too large for his mouth. Cormac knelt beside him. "Your brother has 3 adults watching his plate." Bryn looked uncertain. The king pointed toward Ludo, who was trying to balance a spoon on his nose. "You may be 8 for 1 meal." Bryn considered the offer. Then he placed his serving ledger on the table. He shifted into pale gray-white wolf form and ran toward his brothers. Within moments, all 3 pups were chasing the wrong-footed boot beneath the benches. Cormac watched them play. Calista moved to his side. "You returned his responsibility." "Only after lunch." Calista approved. "A cautious reform. My consultant favors gradual plans." His hand brushed the back of hers. Calista linked their fingers beneath the edge of the tablecloth, hidden from the crowd. Your consultant's contract ends tomorrow. Cormac's grip tightened slightly. I am aware. His voice carried no humor. Before either could continue, a guild herald announced an emergency session in the central hall. Pike and Tressa had requested immediate review of the evidence. They claimed Calista falsified samples to secure a royal contract. The accusation traveled through the assembly faster than dessert. By the time Calista entered the hall, every guild table was full. Merchants crowded the rear benches. Farmers stood along the walls. Crown and Claw reporters occupied the front row with sharpened pencils. Pike sat under guard beside Tressa Vale. He was a narrow man with smooth black hair and a provisioner's gold badge. Tressa wore the blue robe of a senior auditor. Both looked composed. Neither looked hungry. The review panel consisted of 5 guild masters and 1 independent magistrate. Cormac took no seat among them. He stood beside Oswin as the injured contracting party. That boundary mattered. The king could arrest suspects on probable cause. He could not determine guild fraud without review. Calista placed her samples and notes on the evidence table. Pike's advocate argued that a village smokehouse owner lacked certification to assess royal supply chains. He suggested personal involvement with the Alpha King influenced her conclusions. Several reporters wrote faster. Calista looked toward Cormac. His face remained controlled. His eyes promised consequences after proper procedure. She faced the panel. Test the meat without names. The magistrate asked her to explain. Calista proposed a blind examination. The panel would mix her samples with known cuts from assembly vendors. She would identify species, body region, smoke method, storage condition, and likely source class without labels. Pike agreed too quickly. He believed she relied on prior knowledge rather than skill. The panel prepared 12 samples behind a screen. Calista washed her hands, sharpened one steel knife, and began. The hall quieted. She worked by daylight, using color, fat, muscle fibers, and warmed smoke scent. Without seeing a label, she separated wild northern venison from river deer, mixed trimming and poorly stored cuts. She continued through all 12 without hesitation. The panel opened the source list. Every identification matched. One guildmaster checked twice. The crowd murmured. Calista then demonstrated the layering on the wrapping cloth, the triangle scale marks, and the official palace notches hidden in recovered cuts. Oswin presented gate weights and duplicate wagon numbers. Vesadern supplied Riverbend invoices. Restaurant owners provided payment receipts. The tent clerk produced Pike's written transfer order. Captain Osric displayed the false seal presses and cold house key. No wolf pup carried evidence into the room. The case belonged entirely to human records, professional analysis, and witnesses. Pike changed his defense. He claimed Tressa designed the switch. Tressa claimed Pike forged her seal. Their partnership survived for 11 seconds. The magistrate opened Tressa's restricted contract book. Payments from Vale Table Company matched deposits into both suspects' accounts. The guildmasters withdrew to deliberate. During the recess, the hall emptied into the field. Food vendors reopened. Reporters surrounded Calista until Captain Osric created space. Cormac approached after the crowd moved away. You were magnificent. Calista cleaned her knife. I identified meat in front of 600 people who expected you to fail. That improves concentration. His gaze traveled over her face. You did not need me. The statement carried pride, not resentment. Calista put down the cloth. I wanted you there. Cormac's expression softened. He stepped closer, then remembered the public field and stopped. Tomorrow, he said. Her pulse jumped. After the contract? At the first available minute, Calista smiled. That sounds like scheduling, not courtship. I have been advised to improve definitions. By whom? Cormac answered. A difficult professional. She sounds expensive. She has not yet submitted the full invoice. Their eyes held. Flirting with the Alpha King in a field full of journalists should have felt dangerous. It felt natural. Then Nilo ran between them wearing a braided garland of smoked venison strips from another vendor. Calista stared at him. The black pup froze. Cormac studied the sky. He has changed targets. Nilo sat down inside the garland. The principal remains, Calista replied. They returned the venison strips and paid the vendor. The panel announced its decision before dusk. Pike and Tressa were found responsible for contract fraud, theft, falsifying food records, and endangering royal dependents. Their assets would repay suppliers and fund improved nursery inspections. Criminal sentencing would proceed before the Crown Court under an independent judge. The Guild suspended every officer who ignored the weight discrepancies. It also offered Calista immediate master certification. She declined. The hall went quiet again. Calista explained that recognition given after public embarrassment was not the same as a fair professional process. She would accept the same anonymous practical examination offered to every master candidate. The guild president looked toward Cormac. The king folded his arms. Mistress Vennor has already answered. Callista's chest warmed. The guild scheduled her examination in 2 weeks. Cormac addressed the assembly after the ruling. He did not describe himself as another victim of fraud. He admitted that he had relied on polished reports while his sons became thinner in front of him. He named the nursery staff who had spoken honestly. He credited Riverbend workers for preserving records. He announced independent weighing at palace gates and protected reporting for kitchen workers. Then he invited his sons onto the platform. Bryn led them in wolf form. The pale gray-white pup climbed the steps with his head high. Ludo followed with the recovered carrot still behind one ear. Nilo attempted to carry the ceremonial announcement scroll. The scroll was longer than he was. He reached the second step before rolling backward inside it. Cormac caught the bundle. The crowd laughed warmly. The king unrolled his youngest son and placed him beside Bryn. All 3 princes stood near their father, healthy enough to be mischievous and safe enough to fail publicly. Cormac looked toward Calista below the platform. Their recovery began because they found someone who looked past royal labels and inspected what was actually in front of her. He offered his hand. Calista understood the public choice. He was not claiming her romantically before she consented. He was recognizing her work where everyone could see it. She climbed the steps and took his hand. The crowd applauded. Bryn sat on her left boot. Nilo sat on her right. Ludo discovered the announcement scroll tasted disappointing. Cormac leaned closer. The picture will suggest a family declaration. Calista kept smiling at the crowd. Our conclusion remains preliminary until tomorrow. You are very confident, Cormac observed. You keep holding my hand. She became aware that their fingers were still linked. Calista tightened them deliberately. Cormac's smile appeared in full view of the assembly. Crown and Claw printed that smile across its front page. The headline was worse than expected. Alpha King holds Omega's hand while 3 princes guard her feet. Oswin purchased 6 copies. He called them administrative records. Callista's contract ended at noon the following day. Oswin brought the final payment ledger to the nursery. Cormac brought no papers at all. The 3 princes sat around Callista's open case while she packed her scales and sample vials. Bryn folded the paper wrappers into careful squares. Ludo placed every tool in the wrong compartment. Nilo climbed into the empty half of the case. Calista lifted him out. He climbed back in. This case is for equipment. Nilo curled into a smaller shape. I am helping equipment. Cormac leaned against the doorway. His qualifications remained disputed. Calista pointed to the floor. The black pup sighed with the weariness of a prince facing unreasonable regulation. He stepped out and sat on her boot instead. The other boys had returned to human form. Ludo held up a glass vial. Can this carry gravy? Only if you want gravy 1 spoon at a time. He considered the possibility seriously. Bryn closed the final packet. His pale hair fell over one eye. Do you have to go? The room quieted. Calista sat beside him on the rug. My shop needs me. Ferris has managed it alone for more than a week. You could manage it from here, Ludo proposed. Smokehouses dislike being managed from 6 miles away. Nilo rested his chin on her knee. Father can move palace. Cormac inspected the windows. The foundations present difficulties. Calista smiled, but the ache beneath it remained. The boys no longer needed her to inspect every meal. Tessa had rebuilt the nursery menu. 2 independent clerks weighed deliveries. Cormac ate breakfast with his sons and supervised supper whenever counsel allowed. Bryn had stopped saving food in his pockets. Ludo had not stopped saving food anywhere. That was preference, not fear. Callista's work was complete. She looked at Cormac. His face held the controlled stillness he used when something mattered too much for public handling. "The carriage is ready," he told her. No request to stay followed. She respected him for that. She disliked him slightly for the same reason. Calista fastened her case. Bryn walked with her to the courtyard. Ludo carried one harmless wooden spoon as a farewell gift to himself. Nilo remained in wolf form and rode in Cormac's arms. The king had become better at holding him. He no longer looked afraid that one wrong movement would break the child. Nilo sprawled across his chest and chewed a coat button without opposition. At the carriage, Bryn hugged Calista first. His arms tightened around her waist. "We know which food is honest now." "And what do you do if it is not?" Bryn answered. "Tell father." "Before escaping through a ventilation tunnel?" Bryn glanced at Ludo. "Probably." Calista accepted the limit of the guarantee. Ludo hugged her next. Nilo transferred from Cormac's arms to hers and attempted permanent residence beneath her chin. The king reclaimed him after negotiation involving 2 approved meat strips. Calista entered the carriage. Cormac remained beside the door. "Tomorrow," he reminded her. Her heart beat harder. "The contract has ended. That is why tomorrow matters. Should I expect another basket of evidence?" His gaze warmed. "Expect me after closing." The door shut. Calista watched him through the window until the carriage turned beneath the gate. Vennor Smokehouse greeted her with familiar disorder. Ferris had maintained the fires, completed every order, and reorganized the spice shelf according to a system no honest person could understand. Calista corrected the shelf first. Then she checked the curing room, reviewed accounts, and answered village questions about the Alpha King. She confirmed that he was tall. She denied that they were secretly married. She refused to describe the exact condition of his shoulders. An elderly customer bought 2 pounds of venison and announced that refusal was confirmation. By evening, the shop settled. Juniper smoke warmed the rafters. Rain began outside, tapping softly against the repaired window. Calista changed from her work apron into a dark blue dress, then became annoyed with herself and changed back. She changed again. Ferris watched from the doorway. "Is this an inspection?" "Go home." Ferris lifted the bowl. "Should I leave the expensive strawberries?" Calista eyed the small bowl on the table. Ferris left before she could answer. Cormac arrived 10 minutes after closing. He came without a royal carriage. One guard remained across the lane near the cooper's shop. The king wore a simple black coat and carried a covered basket. No crown, no ledgers, no children. Calista opened the door. "You are late," Cormac glanced toward the clock. "By 1 minute. Kings should model punctuality. I was delayed by 3 princes conducting a clothing search." She stepped aside. "Did they approve this coat?" Bryn approved it. Ludo added a spoon to the pocket. Nilo removed 1 sock. Cormac entered. Rain and Pine followed him. His presence changed the modest room, not through authority this time, but through attention. He looked at Calista as if the smokehouse held only one thing worth seeing. She closed the door. "What is in the basket?" "Dinner." Calista lifted the cloth. Inside sat an uneven roast, 2 scorched root vegetables, bread, and a small jar of gravy. The venison slices varied dramatically. "You cooked this." Cormac peeled off his gloves. "Without supervision. That was reckless. The physician remains nearby." She laughed. They ate at the work table beneath hanging rosemary. The roast was slightly dry but honest. Cormac had used no ornamental herbs, false labels, or hidden grain. Calista approved it. He looked absurdly pleased. After dinner, neither cleared the table. Rain softened the village outside. Firelight moved across Cormac's face. The basket sat between them, emptied of every official purpose. He reached into his coat. Calista raised one hand. If that is a contract, I will put you outside. Cormac produced the wooden spoon Ludo had hidden. She stared. The prince believes it improves formal occasions. He may be right. Cormac placed it on the table. Then he moved his chair closer. I came without a position to offer you. Calista's pulse quickened. No royal laboratory? No. Calista continued. No permanent palace appointment? No. No authority to reorganize my shelves? He looked toward the corrected spice jars. I lack the courage. Calista smiled. Cormac's expression became serious. I needed you because my sons were hungry. I trusted you because you told me what I failed to see. Neither explains why I looked for you in every room after you left. Warmth spread beneath her ribs. He continued carefully. I want to court you. Publicly if you permit it. Slowly if you need it. Badly if my recent performance predicts anything. Your disguise work requires improvement. I have accepted that. Calista continued. Your cooking remains uneven, deliberately rustic. Your sons steal industrial quantities of meat. Cormac conceded. A hereditary weakness. Calista leaned toward him. What do you steal? Cormac's gaze lowered to her mouth. Time with my meat inspector. The answer sent heat across her cheeks. Former meat inspector. Then the theft has become personal. His hand moved over the table, palm upward. Calista placed her fingers in his. You may court me. Relief softened his face. Publicly? Yes. Cormac checked. Slowly? Within reason. Cormac stood and came around the table. Calista rose to meet him. They stopped close enough for his coat to brush her dress. His hand settled at her waist. The touch was firm, warm, and familiar from every crowded corridor they had shared. Does within reason include kissing? He asked. That depends on the requested evidence. Cormac bent his head. I have strawberries. Influence. I carried baskets. Calista repeated, adequately. I wore carrots. Callista's composure broke. She laughed, caught the front of his coat, and pulled him down. Their first kiss began with his smile against her mouth. Then, the humor softened into heat. Cormac drew her closer. His broad hand spread over her back, while the other cradled her jaw. Calista slid her fingers into his dark hair and felt the restraint in him loosen. He kissed her slowly, with enough patience to make every previous almost kiss return at once. The cold room cloth, the carriage, the sunset smokehouse. Every interruption had sharpened the moment instead of weakening it. Calista leaned into him. His scent surrounded her, pine, rain, and warm skin beneath clean wool. Her omega instincts settled with a deep certainty that had nothing to do with rank. Cormac's thumb moved beneath her cheek. When they finally separated, their foreheads remained together. Your pulse is rapid, he murmured. Your inspection technique is unlicensed. I am willing to repeat the test. Calista kissed him again before he became more pleased with himself. The wooden spoon fell from the table. Neither retrieved it. Their courtship became public the next morning. Cormac returned to the palace with juniper smoke in his coat and one button fastened incorrectly. Oswin met him in the entrance hall. The beta examined both details. Should I prepare a statement? Cormac removed his gloves. Yes. Oswin blinked. The king added, Mistress Vennor has agreed to a public courtship. The terms remain private. Are there terms? She is a professional. Oswin wrote that down. The princes received the news at breakfast. Bryn nodded as if approving a well-supported conclusion. Ludo asked whether courtship included extra gravy. Nilo announced that father had finally eaten the strawberries. Cormac did not correct him. The official statement reached Crown and Claw before noon. The newspaper printed, Alpha King confirms courtship with Omega, who caught his sons stealing a deer. Calista objected that the deer had already been processed. No correction appeared. Public courtship did not make their schedules convenient. Calista worked at the smokehouse. Cormac ruled a kingdom and raised 3 recovering children. They built affection through visits rather than relocation. Cormac came to the village twice a week. He carried wood, learned the scales, and gradually stopped frightening customers into unnecessary bows. Calista ate breakfast at the palace every 3rd morning. She inspected no official food unless invited under a new contract. That boundary mattered. She came as the woman Cormac courted, not an unpaid extension of her work. The princes spent one afternoon each week at the smokehouse. Bryn learned labeling. Ludo learned that knives required adult hands. Nilo learned nothing about windows. His failure appeared intentional. Cormac's flirting improved with practice. During one evening visit, Calista found him leaning against her cutting table with his sleeves rolled up. "Do you need something?" she asked. "Instruction." "In what?" His eyes moved over her slowly. "You have broad expertise." Calista placed a basket of wood chips in his hands. "Begin with the rear stove." Cormac laughed and obeyed. On another night, he found her testing a new juniper blend. He stood behind her and placed both hands on the table, surrounding her without touching. "Does this smoke improve venison?" "Yes," Cormac asked. "And kings?" Calista turned within the space of his arms. "Kings require longer curing." "How long?" "I will inspect weekly." His mouth curved. "A demanding schedule." He kissed her beside the cooling rack until Ferris entered, reversed direction, and closed the door from outside. The princes created their own courtship procedures. Bryn asked Calista whether Cormac listened when corrected. She confirmed moderate improvement. Ludo asked whether she planned to kiss father every visit. Calista told him meal schedules were easier to predict. Nilo brought her objects he considered romantic. These included a pine cone, 1 green sock, and a beetle that had not agreed to participate. Calista accepted the pine cone. She returned the sock. The beetle escaped independently. 2 weeks after the assembly, Calista sat for the Royal Provisioners Guild Master Examination. The guild attempted to make the process impressive. 12 judges wore formal robes. 6 long tables held covered samples. A public gallery overlooked the hall. Calista arrived with 1 steel knife and no royal escort. Cormac respected her request. He attended anonymously in the back row, wearing another plain cloak that fooled no one. The 3 princes sat beside him. Bryn held the program. Ludo held 2 snacks. Nilo held a judge's missing glove. Oswin recovered the glove before proceedings began. The examination tested storage, anatomy, curing, safety, purchasing law, and fraud detection. Calista identified mislabeled cuts, corrected dangerous temperatures, and designed a winter ration plan for young shifters. The final challenge required tracing 5 anonymous meat products through smoke, salt, wrapping, and transport marks. Calista completed it with 17 minutes remaining. The judges withdrew. Cormac stayed in the back row until she looked toward him. Then he came down the steps. "You were magnificent again. I arranged meat." Cormac decided, "You continue understating attractive things." The public gallery leaned forward. Calista lowered her voice. "Your disguise has failed. I came to support a professional. Your sons are eating the examination snacks." Cormac looked back. Ludo had acquired a 3rd packet. Nilo was wearing the empty program as a cape. Bryn looked responsible without actively preventing anything. They came to support the catering, the king decided. The guild judges returned. Calista received the highest score recorded in 18 years. The president presented her with a master's brass seal and offered a place on the royal supplier board. Calista accepted the seal. She declined the permanent board seat. Instead, she proposed an independent inspection cooperative for small producers excluded from guild contracts. Members could pool laboratory space, calibrated scales, and legal support without surrendering their businesses. The guild hesitated. Cormac did not speak. He had learned not to solve her professional negotiations with a crown. Calista presented cost estimates, membership commitments, and evidence that small suppliers had detected 3 recent labeling errors before senior auditors. The guild approved a 1-year trial. Only then did Cormac applaud. The princes applauded louder. Nilo's paper cape tore in half. At the reception afterward, Cormac introduced Calista to the territorial delegates as Master Vennor and the woman he loved. The second description had not been discussed. Calista looked at him. The hall waited. Cormac's confidence remained, but his pulse moved visibly at his throat. He had made the declaration without claiming an answer from her. She stepped closer. You have expanded the public statement. Was it inaccurate? Calista answered, incomplete. His expression changed. Calista turned toward the delegates. Alpha King Cormac Aldergrave is the man I love, despite his inability to appear ordinary in any cloak. Laughter moved through the hall. Relief and joy opened across Cormac's face. He cupped her cheek. May I? Calista surveyed the hundreds of witnesses, 3 attentive princes, and Oswin holding a draft statement. The evidence is public. Cormac kissed her. The kiss began gently. Applause rose around them. Callista's hand settled against his chest, feeling his heart strike beneath the formal coat. He drew her closer. The applause became louder. Nilo shouted that father had passed inspection. Ludo asked whether kissing earned gravy. Bryn informed him that the categories remained separate. Calista laughed against Cormac's mouth. He kissed her once more, shorter and warmer. I love you, he murmured where only she could hear. You carried the basket adequately. His eyes narrowed with amused heat. I will seek a higher rating tonight. Callista's face warmed in front of the entire guild. Cormac looked deeply satisfied. Their relationship became official without becoming simple. Calista retained Vennor Smokehouse. Cormac retained a palace that could not be moved beside it. They divided weeks, carriage rides, and breakfasts with practical determination. The princes gained rooms above the smokehouse for village visits. Bryn chose the room nearest his brothers. Ludo chose the one nearest the kitchen. Nilo selected a cupboard before being redirected toward a bed. Cormac kept a plain coat at Callista's house. It was genuinely plain because she purchased it herself. He complained that no one recognized him while wearing it. Calista reminded him that this had been the objective. I miss the cabbage bows, he admitted. Power has spoiled you. Your kisses may repair the damage. Calista warned, that treatment remains experimental. I consent to every trial. He proved an enthusiastic patient. Their first full week as an acknowledged couple began with a scheduling dispute. Cormac sent a royal secretary to ask which evenings Calista had available. Calista returned the page with 2 dates circled and 6 impossible assumptions corrected in red ink. The secretary carried it back as though transporting a military surrender. Cormac arrived at the smokehouse that night, holding the amended schedule. You crossed out the state dinner. Calista kept trimming a venison round. I already promised that evening to the cooperative. You also wrote, a crown is not a calendar. Was the handwriting unclear? He placed both palms on the work table and leaned toward her. The setting sun warmed his dark hair and caught the humor in his eyes. The handwriting was beautiful, Cormac murmured. The author is severe. Calista set down her knife. You like severe women. I like one severe woman. The answer landed with enough heat to make the smokehouse feel smaller. She stepped between his arms. Juniper clung to his coat from his last visit. Beneath it waited the clean cedar scent that belonged only to him. Then the state dinner may survive without her, Calista decided. Cormac's mouth hovered near hers. 7 kingdoms may require consolation. They have you. Their loss is now greater. She kissed him before royal tragedy became unbearable. Ferris entered through the rear door, carrying kindling. He saw the king bent over Calista, turned without changing expression, and walked outside again. The kindling remained in his arms for 20 minutes. Scheduling improved after that. Cormac reserved 2 evenings for Calista and 1 afternoon for the boys at the smokehouse. She agreed to attend formal events when her work allowed. Neither treated affection as ownership. The arrangement sounded sensible. It also produced a royal carriage outside Vennor smokehouse, often enough for the village baker to begin selling courtship rolls. They were ordinary rolls twisted into crowns. The price was not ordinary. Oswin bought 4 for administrative study. The children's recovery did not move in a straight line. During the first cold storm, thunder shook the nursery windows. Bryn disappeared from his bed. Cormac found him in the pantry with 3 wrapped portions hidden beneath his nightshirt. The pale-haired boy stood very still. Shame pulled his shoulders forward. Cormac did not demand the food. He sat on the pantry floor and asked whether Bryn expected the meals to vanish again. The boy nodded. Rain struck the roof. Dried herbs shifted softly overhead, filling the small room with mint and bay. Cormac explained each safeguard Calista had installed. Then he admitted safeguards could fail. If they did, Bryn could wake him, Tessa, Mora, or any guard on the nursery floor. Even during council? Bryn asked. Especially during council. What if you are meeting an ambassador? Cormac considered this. Then the ambassador will learn our household priorities. Bryn's mouth twitched. The king offered to store 1 emergency box in the nursery. It would be sealed, dated, and replaced every week. Bryn could inspect it whenever fear returned. That gave the child security without turning hidden food into another crime. They packed the box together. Calista arrived the next morning and found 3 portions, a water flask, 2 blankets, and 1 wooden horse inside it. Ludo had added the horse in case of emotional emergency. Nilo had added half a sock. Calista replaced the sock with a clean pair. Weeks later, Bryn forgot to inspect the box for the first time. Cormac noticed. He did not announce the victory. He simply met Calista in the corridor and pulled her into a quiet alcove. He forgot, the king whispered. Hope made his voice unsteady. Calista touched his face. Because he remembered you. Cormac shut his eyes for one breath. When he opened them, warmth had replaced the old guilt. Stay tonight, he requested. She traced the line of his jaw. To observe the emergency box? To prevent an emergency in my room. His low tone sent a deliberate shiver through her. Calista leaned closer until his breath changed. Your symptoms sound invented. I learned from an expert in suspicious claims. Treatment may be strict, Cormac murmured. I continue to admire strict women. She kissed the corner of his mouth and walked away before he could catch her. Cormac followed. Kings, Calista discovered, could move very quickly when properly motivated. The boys also returned to shifting for pleasure instead of escape. Bryn stopped checking every gate, while Ludo chased leaves and Nilo investigated forbidden benches. Cormac raced with them in his immense, dark wolf form. He once misjudged a turn and emerged from an empty basket wearing it around his neck. Calista called it a hunting injury. His sons called it the best afternoon of the month. The family no longer needed a crisis to gather in one place. They found reasons on ordinary days. Their first overnight visit to the smokehouse proved that ordinary days required planning. Calista had prepared 3 beds and locked every sample jar. She forgot the laundry basket. Nilo found it within 4 minutes. The black pup tunneled beneath the sheets until the basket crossed the floor by itself. Ludo pounced, Bryn pulled, and Nilo emerged wearing a pillowcase like ceremonial robes. Supper filled the small kitchen with thyme, butter, and roasting venison. Cormac cut Nilo's portion smaller, remembered Ludo disliked soft carrots, and let Bryn inspect every plate without comment. None of it looked regal. It looked careful. After dinner, 3 princes attempted to wash 5 plates. Water reached the floor before the first plate reached the rack. Cormac took the mop. Calista redirected him with 1 finger against his chest. He followed the finger instead of the water, caught her waist, and stole a kiss that tasted faintly of thyme. 3 children applauded from the sink. Calista made the king finish the floor. At bedtime, Bryn first chose the bed nearest the door. Then he paused and moved to the window, leaving the exit unguarded. Cormac noticed, but did not turn the moment into a ceremony. Calista understood. Bryn no longer believed he had to protect every doorway alone. Soon 3 colors of fur covered the blankets. Bryn curled pale gray-white beside the window. Ludo sprawled red-brown across the middle bed, and Nilo vanished against a dark quilt. The boys' weight had returned to healthy levels. Their physician now needed only ordinary monthly checks. Downstairs, Cormac wrapped both arms around Calista. Tiny wet tracks crossed the boards, and the laundry basket began moving overhead again. Calista handed him the lamp. The ruler of 7 kingdoms went upstairs to negotiate with his youngest son and one undefeated household object. Winter arrived with the first cooperative inspection. 12 small producers brought scales and samples to Callista's expanded workroom. Honest suppliers gained access to palace bids. Labels became simpler. Anonymous reporting protected kitchen workers. Vessa Dern joined the cooperative and replaced Riverbend's berry smoke with clean alder for correctly labeled budget cuts. No one was punished for selling inexpensive food honestly. Pike and Tressa received prison terms, restitution orders, and permanent removal from royal contracts. Their seized profits funded nutrition inspections for schools and nursery houses. Mistress Mora remained governess after completing new safeguarding training. She apologized to the princes for trusting Pike's claims over their hunger. Bryn accepted slowly. Ludo accepted after she learned to make oatcakes. Nilo accepted everyone who carried oatcakes. The palace did not become perfect. It became more observable. 3 months after the original theft, Calista prepared the largest smoked venison haunch of the winter. It hung near the same repaired window where the prince's first plan had failed. This haunch was intended for the palace midwinter table. Calista tied a bright green tag around the hook. Royal delivery. Do not touch. Cormac stood behind her with both arms around her waist. His chin rested near her temple. The wording invites challenge, only to badly supervised princes. Cormac assured her, they are currently with Ferris. A wooden crate scraped outside. Calista and Cormac became still. The window latch lifted. A pale gray-white head appeared over the sill. Bryn inspected the room. His blue-gray eyes found the adults. He froze. Behind him, Ludo pushed the crate closer. Nilo waited with a coil of rope around his black shoulders. The operation had improved. They now understood geometry. Calista folded her arms. Cormac kept one hand at her waist. Bryn looked at the green tag. Then he ducked behind the sill and shifted. His pale head rose again, now human and deeply serious. We were testing the latch, he explained. Cormac nodded gravely. And the rope? Ludo's red-brown ears appeared beneath Bryn. Secondary test. Nilo lifted the coil. Helping equipment. Calista looked at the repaired window, the crate, and the 3 different colored thieves arranged beneath it. Your exit strategy has improved. Bryn's pale tail wagged once. Your witness control remains weak. The tail stopped. Cormac kissed Callista's cheek. What is the penalty? The suspects helped carry the haunch through the front door. Nilo objected that the window was shorter. That is why it is closed. The boys abandoned the operation and came inside. Cormac lowered the haunch from its hook. Bryn took the front carrying strap. Ludo took the rear. Nilo attached himself to the middle without improving weight distribution. Together, they carried it toward the royal wagon. The haunch reached the door. It became stuck sideways. 3 princes pulled. Cormac pushed. Calista stood back and watched the most powerful family in Aldergrave lose another argument with smoked venison. Turn it, she advised. Everyone turned in a different direction. The haunch remained where it was. Cormac looked over his shoulder. Professional assistance? Calista walked closer and placed one hand on his chest. My contract ended. His eyes warmed. I can offer alternative compensation. In front of your sons? Delayed payment. Heat touched her face. Bryn looked between them. Are you flirting while the meat is trapped? Calista inspected the doorway. The evidence supports that conclusion. Cormac smiled. Ludo asked whether flirting would move the haunch. Nilo sat on the carrying strap and announced that it might. Calista laughed, took the front end and directed the turn. The haunch cleared the doorway in seconds. Cormac looked offended by the simplicity. You moved it without commanding anyone. The venison was not negotiating. He recognized the words from their first cooking lesson. His hand caught hers. Neither am I. Cormac drew her close and kissed her beneath the smokehouse sign, while 3 royal wolf pups guarded the winter feast from everyone except themselves. Calista had once believed she caught 3 hungry thieves. Instead, she uncovered a stolen supply chain and taught a king to make breakfast. She became part of a family whose love language involved meat, paperwork, and repeated failure at windows. The haunch reached the palace intact. Almost. Nilo ate 1 corner during transport. Thank you for listening to Moonlit Romance Tales. I hope this story brought you a little laughter, warmth, and a peaceful moment in a world that can sometimes feel heavy. If you enjoyed this tale, please like, subscribe, and share it to spread more happiness. I'll see you in the next one.